Hi, welcome back to Stock Talk. Today I want to talk a little bit about relative strength at the beginning of this show. I'm going to go through a lot of different stock requests today, but I want to start the initial segment, the initial lesson on relative strength. I've talked about a lot of different indicators. I haven't brought up relative strength yet, and there's been a reason for that. I will explain that as we go through. So let's go ahead and get into the agenda for today. So it is on relative strength. I'm going to talk about when I think relative strength is most effective, and I do kind of pick my spots with relative strength. And then I also want to show you how I go about using relative strength, similar to how I would analyze price. And then I'm going to give you a couple different examples of ways that I would use relative strength in what I consider to be different ways. It's not exactly the same every time. I'm not just looking at a specific number or I'm just looking at the line or anything like that. I want to show you some different techniques that you might be able to implement into what you're doing. And then we're going to go through all of the stock requests that have come through this week. Before we get into the lesson, my services can be found on rabilstockresearch.com. If you go to the individual package monthly and sign up for that, currently I'm giving a discount of $50 for the first 2 months. If you plug in this coupon code StockTalk, you'll see that number come up. $50 for 2 months will pop up in there. Anyway, if you want to take a look at that, feel free. I generate a lot of most of my reports are to generate individual stock ideas in all different types of markets. So anyway, that's the goal, going through thousands and thousands of charts and trying to identify some interesting patterns. So I want to go into this discussion on relative strength, and I've got 3 different stocks that I want to look at. And so the first thing I want to do is look at NVDA. And I'm looking at it during this period. And if we remember back in February, March of 2020, when the market got crushed, okay, this stock dropped. Now this is post-split, so it's not the exact numbers, but you'll get the idea. I mean, we made a pretty significant drop in price. It was, probably post-split around 77, dropped down under 50. That was a pretty significant drop. And the market was cascading to the downside. But when we got down to this bottom here, so when the market was down at its lows, we were extremely oversold on the market. Just generally speaking, the market was very oversold, and the sentiment numbers were incredibly bearish, like one of the most bearish that we'd seen in years and years. So when I see that type of combination, I'm definitely going to be more interested in looking at relative strength. I want to find the stocks that are holding up. Look at what this relative strength line was doing through the decline. It was actually hitting new highs. So this line is the difference. It's basically NVDA divided by the S&P, giving you the ratio. So when you look at it this way, if this line is rising, it's telling you what the stock's doing based on its own merit. And even though the stock had dropped significantly, we've got a line that's really just going straight up. I love using relative strength when the market's getting hammered, when the market's getting hit. I want to look at the stocks that are holding up. Even if we go through a 2 to 3 week pullback in the market, I want to look at what stocks are holding up right now. Sometimes we'll see, different patterns that will develop. So, one thing I should just mention, I mean, when the market is really strong and it's made a big move and you've had sort of an extended run in the market, kind of like what we've been dealing with recently, I shy away a little bit from relative strength, because those are the stocks that have been leading, no doubt, but they're the ones that have the risk of the pullback risk. Where you get kind of a drawdown in these stocks when the market's getting hit just because people are taking profits. So I'm constantly looking. I always refer to relative strength, even though I'm not looking at it or I'm not referring to it. I'm looking at it on every chart. When I go through my analysis, it's on all my charts. I'm looking at it. It is important to me, but it garners a lot more importance when the market has gone through, especially when it's gone through a really deep sell-off, bear market type of decline. So this is one example, and this is one where if you notice the 18-week line, that's this purple line, was rising throughout this decline. It never turned down. So we had a bear market and a massive drop in the stock, but the 18-week line was continuing to rise. And I don't have the 40 on here, but it was rising as well underneath as well. So actually this is the 72-month, I'm sorry, the 18-month, which is a 72-week. They're basically the same line, and it shows you that the stock pulled right back to the 18-month line, and it happened to be right where all this price support was. So we had a lot of things combined showing that this relative strength indication wasn't just all by itself. There were a number of I think positive things taking place. So that's one example. Let's just look at another. As this comes up, Air Products. So notice the drop during that same decline in the market, how this actually made another big drop. It took out this prior low, pretty big sell-off, but it did find major support. It came back to this prior support area. So I was very intrigued by this. But what really caught my eye is what the relative strength was doing. Notice the difference. So even though this is dropping, it's hard to tell when a stock is hitting new lows like this just how strong it really is. But when you look at it on a relative basis, you can see it was holding up much better than the S&P was in this instance. And so that ended up offering a pretty nice opportunity. We can look back actually at another time, and this is another example of how I like to use relative strength. So I'm looking for trend change. My version of trend change would be a break of the trend line, and then when you rally up and you come back and test the moving average, test the trend line, and then turn up from there. And when you have that, then you have the relative strength, the relative performance line telling you that that trend is changing. It's based on its own merit. It's taken the S&P out of the equation in this case. And sometimes you can find a lot of interesting patterns that way. So let's look at the third example. This is Marriott. And, I want to make sure that I covered this because I do think it's a little bit more unique, because right now, if we look at what the S&P is doing, the S&P made a low right here, same. So if I were to come down and say, price was doing this, and then here's the same low. Here's the low that I'm talking about right here in the S&P. And now the S&P has gone to a new low, and yet this stock is turning up. Now, when you look at the relative strength, it doesn't look all that dynamic. Yeah, it's breaking this downtrend line, but it's still below its moving average. It's not giving you the kind of indication yet that there's something really meaningful going on. But what I like to look for is the market starts to move down. So we just made a lower low. Let's say we make another lower low in price on the S&P. I'm looking for the stocks that are making higher bottoms, higher highs during this period. So they're not necessarily breaking out, and it might not be a higher high here. It could just be something like this, where you go up, and instead of going to a new low, you make a higher low, and then you come up and make another higher low. You don't really break out, but you're showing improving bottoms while the market's making lower lows. So this is a little bit of a hidden relative strength, something we want to be on the lookout for. It might show up in a scooter ranking or something like that. It could show up in the relative strength line a little bit, but you want to start comparing the price bottoms to your stock, to the market when it starts to work lower. And then when the market looks like it's finally turning, this is the type of stock that'll probably break out. So this is showing early indications. I'm not claiming that this has already proven itself, but if the market makes another lower low and this makes another higher low, then you should be on the lookout for this to break out when things starts to turn around. So just something to be on the lookout for. Relative strength is definitely important to me. Wanted to make sure I spent a little bit of time on it in a specific lesson. So let's go ahead and get into some individual stocks and do some analysis. Okay, so I got my 4 charts up now. One thing I wanted to mention, I had a question about this, so let me just review. If you want to get my indicators or my chart, the easiest way to do it is you go up on the left under chart styles, click on that. If you click on this experts category and scroll down, you'll see my name. And then you click on whatever chart you want to change I'll do the weekly here and click on that and just pop in my name, and that'll give you the weekly chart. So if it ends up being the wrong time frame, you can go up and change the time frame up at the top, but at least you'll have the chart very easily with the same colors and everything like that. So just wanted to make sure you have the ability to do that. Let's go ahead and get into some analysis. First stock is SCPL. So we've got a pretty good trend. So if you notice, we've got a rising 18-month. We're above that. We've been working sideways for several months. On the weekly chart, we actually have a low ADX condition. Again, been kind of working sideways. Green has been above red, meaning the buyers have kind of held their strength throughout this consolidation pattern recently. And I think that's a good sign. So the one thing that bugs me about this a little bit was the violence of this sell-off. And it might take a little work to get through this 2021 area. It might not do it on the first try. So you got to be careful there. And I think if I want to play this, it looks to me like this level here is pretty key. We've come down and tested it twice, so maybe give a little room underneath that. But if you're playing this, I think as long as it stays above this horizontal line that I've drawn, I think this is in pretty good shape. Union Pacific. So this is a little disturbing. I mean, we talk about relative strength, right? Look at what this is doing on a relative basis. So the stock had been moving up pretty much for the last 6 months or so. Actually, for the last year, it's been making higher highs and higher lows. I mean, it's moving up more than that, but just recently where you made a new high, another new high, another new high, and look at how we're making lower highs on the relative strength. So based on its own merit, this stock is not keeping pace. The only reason why the stock has been going up is because the market's pulling it up. That's basically what it's saying. And then recently we just broke, even when the stock was right up here testing the high, we actually broke to a new 2-year low on a relative basis. So those types of things you want to be looking at. It was basically a precursor to this sell-off that we've seen. Yes, the ADX was very weak. Yes, recently the MACD had started to kind of give up some, but I think for me the relative strength was just shouting that this is not really the place you want to be. So now we probably ought to get a little bit of a rally somewhere to 205 to 210. We're sitting on the 18-month line, so you know, very possible we could get a little bit of a rally, but unless we see strength in buyers showing up, right now there's strength in the sellers. So I'd be more inclined to be a seller on a rally at this point. Whirlpool. So this is a stock that actually was requested a few months ago, and we're getting another request now. So we're back to this 200 area. What I was saying, I'd like to see this consolidate, and as long as it holds the 200 area, then I think the bigger picture pattern is still in pretty good shape. So we're coming back to that level, and if you notice, the 18 and the 40 are coming close together. I'd love to see this get to the point where they're actually meeting, or maybe 18 crosses down below the 40 and give that opposing trend pattern where this is going down, this one's going up, and we're sitting at pretty good support. Then I think we've got a reset where we can start to look for a zero line reversal pattern or signs of buyers showing up on the daily chart. So we're getting closer. It's still, I think the key level is 200. I think if we break that, then this whole move is on hold for a while. Doesn't mean it's negative, but it loses a lot of upside momentum potential if it can't hold 200. VFC. So recently we're seeing you know, some weakness here. Notice the ADX is climbing above 25. Now just remember, when ADX is rising, it doesn't care what the direction is. And in this case, it's rising because of the downtrend, not the uptrend. So the red is taking control here. That means the sellers are in command, and the blue line is moving up because of the sellers, not the buyers. So I think that's a pretty legit breakdown. I think there's resistance now, you know, somewhere in that low to mid 70 area on a rally. I would be probably looking to cut this, be a seller. So just something to keep in mind. Relative strength is hitting a new low for you know, 2-3 years here. So hasn't been a good stock, but recently is even breaking down to the downside on a relative basis. So YNDX, nice consolidation pattern that recently broke out in the low 70s. We had the pullback to the 18-week where both lines were rising right underneath, found really good support there. And notice how the 18 crossed down below the 40 on the daily chart. And then we had this sort of opposing trend, what I would call an opposing trend trigger coming back up through 70. And that was sort of the sign that this is ready to get going again. Notice the improvement in the relative strength confirming the trend. So we're getting confirmation on a momentum basis and confirmation on a relative basis. So you break that downtrend line, that's a good sign. Target is, the next target here is in the mid 80s. We got pretty close to that already, but that'd be kind of the next area where I'd be watching to see if sellers show up. If that isn't the case, then we could be working our way up towards 100. So overall, pretty solid pattern though. So Nordstrom's, interesting here, the way this is developing, because we've got a downtrend in place that was broken here. Notice how this was in a downtrend, bottomed during the bear market phase, was sort of a late bloomer, got going again, and now has pulled back to the 18-month line, which is now rising. It's just starting to turn up. So this is a key level. It doesn't mean anything's happening yet, but we've made a strong enough move in MACD on the weekly chart so that through this correction, the MACD is working back down towards zero. Yeah, it's below it a little bit, but if we can get a turn to get this to kind of turn right in here and get price to do something along these lines, I think it's going to need to come up and probably fail and come back around, something like that, where we break a trend line, show some signs of a turn. This could be pretty intriguing, something to be on the lookout for, just based on what's happened recently. Another stock kind of in the same position. Now, the difference here is that we haven't broken the downtrend line. If I draw on the downtrend line, we actually haven't done that. I don't think this is in as strong a shape as JWN from that standpoint, but look at how the 18 months started declining here. That's where it turned down, and now this is the first month where we're turning up. You see how that 18-month is now rising. So it kind of catches my eye from that standpoint. Now we're at a really critical level, another point where MACD on the weekly chart moved up and has come back to the zero line. So this is a key test. If we can turn back up through the 40-week and the 18-week and get things going back to the upside, get this MACD coming back up through the zero line, I think you have to take this a little bit more seriously, at least to a move back up towards the 40-week. So something to kind of be on the lookout for from a short-term standpoint. Definitely signs of improvement from a shorter-term chart where the MACD is trying to get back up through the zero line. Caterpillar had been a really strong stock, started a correction, and now has been working its way back down towards support from the 18-month line. So this is another stock that I'd be kind of stalking as it pulls back. I don't like the gap down. That tells me, and notice how the ADX has crossed above 25 based on the selling on the daily chart. So I think there's some resistance at 200. I think this will bounce around a little bit for, probably for the next month, just based on the recent selling. But we're coming into a zone where probably after that, sometime a month, 6 weeks down the road, I could see this getting intriguing because the 18 is crossing down below the 40. We're getting this opposing trend on the weekly chart, and the monthly chart is still in an uptrend. It's been working off an overbought condition and is coming back to some pretty serious support over the course of the next month or two. I would think it'll start to find that. Let's look at Comerica. Comerica is another one where it doesn't really show. If we look at the relative strength line, it's not doing all that much for me. But when I look at it on a price basis, here's the August low. And remember the August low in the market, and then it went up and then it came down and went to a new low. So the market's gone to a lower low here, and this has made another bottom at a higher level. And look at it, it's already above these prior highs. This is the type of relative strength that I like to look for in this type of environment. You want to be on the lookout for the stocks that have interesting patterns that are showing up up with improving relative strength right now. And just recently, if you look at the last couple of days as the market sold off and now we're trying to bounce, notice the areas that have been the strongest. It's been basic materials, it's been financials, and even energy. So those three areas are kind of intriguing. I'd be going to look inside those areas. So let's look at PLAY. Another stock, it's sort of a similar pattern. Notice this, what's going on here. We're breaking the long-term downtrend line, and now we've pulled back for several months. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-month pullback, and then started to turn. 4-month pullback and started to turn. Now we're trying to lift off. MACD on the monthly chart is trying to get back up through the 0 line. The 18-month line is rising for the first time in quite some time, a couple years. And now we're looking at a 0 line reversal potentially. So this is where, so there's two types of patterns I like to look for. I just want to make a quick point on this. So I like to look for pullbacks in long-term trends on the monthly chart where we're pulling back to the 18-month line. That's the monthly, right? So we've got an uptrend on the monthly and we're pulling back to it. The other stocks I like to look for is where the 18-month has been down and it's starting to turn around and we're getting a pullback to that. That's what's going on here. So these are earlier in the reversal pattern. This is the 2 on a change of trend. We broke the trend line and now we're testing. So 1 is the break of the trend line, 2 is the test of the moving average of the trend line. This is 2 on a long-term trend. So now I'm going to go here saying, okay, I know that there's signs of improvement on the long-term chart. I want to go to the next time frame and see if I can get a signal, some kind of a buy signal, something like that. We're getting there. Because of the environment we're in, because the market is showing increased volatility, because the S&P is showing some selling, showing up, I would be more inclined to make this breakout here and then look to buy a test of the breakout area rather than being a hero and being real quick. I personally would be a little bit waiting for a little bit more confirmation in something like this, but it is a stock I'm watching because of what's going on the long-term chart. EVRI, strong move to the upside. I think this is another stock that we had a few months ago, and it was overbought, kind of extended, and I wanted this to work sideways. It's been doing that, but notice one thing about the ADX. The ADX is rising here. It's not rolling down. We've worked sideways for 3 or 4 bars, and we have no sign of sellers whatsoever on the monthly chart. So now we go to the weekly, and if you notice, the 18-week and the 40-week are both rising at about the same rate. We've worked our way sideways. ADX made a nice reading on the last rally. So all the conditions are still pretty good here. What's going on the daily chart is we've got a low ADX condition that's been in place. So when I see that, I want to see a breakout. So I don't buy early when there's low ADX. I want to see a breakout above these highs. And again, because of the market condition we're in, and the fact that we started this move from down here and now we're trying to break out up here, what I would prefer to have happen is to let this break out and then look to buy a pullback and a little hook and prove that it's a true breakout. Because we can get a lot of these like 1 bar where you just go up for 1 bar and then fail and you get stopped out, you know, like these little nick kind of moves. Get a little bit more confirmation. I think this is a good way to play breakouts, especially when they started from the low end of the range like that. Okay, something to be on the lookout for. So Facebook, notice the difference here. We've been looking at stocks that on a longer term basis had an 18-month that were down and cupping around and we're trying to turn the corner going up. This one has been rising and rising and rising, and it's pretty far from the 18-month. There's a little bit of risk, and it looks to me, based on the last couple weeks and how we've gotten sort of extended, that and look at the gap down. So we've gotten some sellers to show up on the daily chart. I think this wants to correct a little bit. Now it'll probably rally up and come before it comes back down, but I think it wants to fill in some of this some of this open air that it has. There is some support, somewhere around 325. I'm not necessarily looking for this to fall apart, but it might have a little air pocket that it needs to fill in, maybe spend a little bit more time in a correction pattern. So let's look at Ford again. This is another one that was one of the first shows I did. I covered this stock. And one of the things I was looking at was this pullback to the 18-week. And what I mentioned was we already had a couple pullbacks, so I was thinking this would be a little bit more of a complex corrective pattern, and it looks like it could be. Right now, though, we still have a rising 18-week, and we're sitting at the 40-week. Now, based on that alone, and the fact that this was sort of a deep retracement, it's not all that appealing. But one thing I want to point out is we've made a higher bottom. So this is another higher low, and we're sitting at the 40-week. This is a pattern from my book. So we've got a higher bottom here right at the 40-week. Notice what's happening on the MACD. We're making a lower low, and we're getting towards a zero line reversal. And so this is a reverse divergence. So instead of making a lower low in price and a higher low in MACD, we're doing the opposite. We're making a higher low in price and a lower low in MACD. It's still a divergence. It's this reverse. And so it's making me sort of intrigued by this because we have come back down to this 12.5 area, which I do think is support. So it's something to watch for just based on the way this is corrected. We don't really have a strong sense that green is in command right now. So consider making this do the 1, 2, 3, make it break the trend line. Make it come back and test, and then look for a turn to the upside. And if we have that, if we can do that before the 18 rolls over, I mean, if this 18, while we're waiting for a trigger, rolls over like that, then I'm less inclined to be here. I think this is going to take more time. Okay, hope that makes sense. FOXA. So another stock starting to show some signs of improvement. It's been a really, not really done a whole lot. Made a nice move here and then worked up. Notice the strength of the ADX on the up move, and now we've worked sideways. MACD has worked off the overbought condition by coming back down towards zero. Now we're showing some strength over the last couple days. So this is pretty intriguing to me. Definitely a stock to be watching here. I like the big round numbers, and 40 was resistance before a couple times. So I think that's a key level to be on the lookout for. Just kind of be watching that. Okay, let's look at Freeport. And I think this is important so you understand the context of what's taking place. So if we look at this, look at the big move that took place to the upside, and now we're pulling back towards the 18-month line. So I'm predisposed to thinking that this looks pretty good. Look at the ADX reading, powerful breakout, strong move, and now this is the first pullback on the monthly chart. Now, that doesn't necessarily give you the timing. So I'm looking at the weekly chart, and I'm noticing that the 18 and the 40 are getting pretty close together. The MACD is almost at the zero line. We have low ADX. So we had strong ADX on the way up, and now the ADX is pretty low. There's not a lot of red DI strength here. So now look at this. We've come down underneath these levels. So the reason why I'm looking at this, and I wanted I picked this out as one of the requests, is the fact that we've undercut this low. If we come back up through this, this could be a potential undercut and rally where we come up and make a higher low and turn up. So I'd be watching this, not because of what's going on the daily, but because the monthly chart has spent 3 or 4 months pulling back. We've got a pretty strong condition in place on the ADX. We're getting closer on a MACD basis to the zero line. So a number of interesting things taking place here. Well, we've run out of time. Thanks for watching. My contact information is listed. And let's see some more stock requests coming in from different people. Love to get some more coming through. Send it to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, Grayson Rose here with StockCharts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, consider giving it a like down below, maybe leave us a comment, and if you're new to the channel, you can subscribe at the link up above. We're gonna bring you daily content from an incredible collection of technical analysts and financial experts.